everyone. I'm Molly Lindquist, part of the MantiCares team, and I want to welcome you to our Patient from Hell podcast club. The purpose of the Patient from Hell PCORI episodes, funded by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, is to bring PCORI-funded researchers onto the podcast to share about their research so more of us can learn about it and use it to help us in our own lives as patients or care partners. And the podcast club gives us the opportunity to chat with members of our community to get their thoughts on each episode. Today, I'm super excited to chat with Haley Pollack, co-founder and executive director of our nonprofit partner, Bright Spot Network. Bright Spot Network provides young cancer survivors who are parents of small children with a safe space for individual and familial healing, recovery, and reconnection. So today we're going to speak with Haley about her personal experience with cancer, the work that Bright Spot Network does, and we're going to get her thoughts on episode 73 of the Patient from Hell podcast, From Doctor to Lung Cancer Patient, Dr. Sydney Barnett's Story. Haley, so great to have you here. As you and I have chatted before, and you know this is the work that you do is very near and dear to my heart as someone diagnosed when I had 3- and 5-year-old daughters at the time. So thank you so much for being here. And we'd love to start maybe with a little bit about, your personal experience with cancer.
Thank you so much for having me, Molly. I'm just really glad to be here. And as you know, I like podcasts and I like to be on a podcast about a podcast. So that's great. So my story really starts in 2018 when I was diagnosed with stage 3C colon cancer. Originally, I had gone to my doctor because I was constipated and I was tired. And at the time, my husband was just like, you do not have to live this way. So you should just go to the doctor. And, when the stars aligned to, that I took the doctor's appointment. At the time, I had a pretty intense full-time job. I had a new baby. I had a 3-year-old daughter. And when I went to the doctor, he really listened to my concerns. He heard that I was tired. He heard. So I got a blood panel, and the blood panel ultimately threw me on a kind of crazy trajectory of tests and pokes and prods and all of that, ultimately leading to a colonoscopy that showed I had stage 3C colon cancer. At the time, I had a 6-month-old baby and a 3-year-old, and the diagnosis was totally shocking. I was not anticipating a stage 3C colon cancer diagnosis at 37. And one of the things that, one of the very first things I thought of were of my very little kids. How would I talk to my curious 3-year-old about all of this? What would this mean for my baby? And, I did the things that you do, and I went to the internet, and I really wasn't able to find what I needed. And while I had totally amazing medical care, and in many ways, really great other types of support, my social workers really weren't able to provide the resources that I needed as a new mom, as a young person. And that kind of threw me on a journey of creating Bright Spot. When I went to the internet, I wasn't able to find what I needed. And then that experience of being diagnosed with cancer, young, which is so terrifying. There was this double experience of alienation. Now I was alienated even more from, the cancer world, from resources, from everything. And so eventually I was introduced to another young mom with cancer, Amy Barnes, and Amy and I became fast friends. And she was really the first parent that I met that also had cancer, and her kids were the same age as my kids, and we just became fast friends. And both of us had experience in the nonprofit space, not in the cancer world, but from that experience of from our common experience of cancer and our professional lives, we founded Bright Spot Network. And so then here we are today.
Yeah. So what are the programs, maybe I'll phrase it in kind of a, what are the things that you've accomplished with the organization that you're most proud of at this point?
Sure. So Bright Spot Network has a whole host of different types of programs that range from, we have a free book program where we send out free books to families on kids books to families on cancer, grief and loss, as well as big emotions, which, is how a parent's cancer diagnosis often appears for a little kid. And so we have a free book program, and that's been really great. And this year in 2024, we're going to have sent out 1,600 books to 800 families. And so that's really amazing. We have an art box program where we send out, art kits where everything's included. And that's just meant to be a point of connection between parent and child when there's so much going on. We know how important that connection is, both for the patient as well as for the child. And we hear things from parents like, this is the first time I felt like a mom since my diagnosis. We have virtual support groups for parents that, we really try to meet the needs of the community. So we have groups for parents in active treatment, but we also have a special group for parents with stage 4 cancer, for long-term survivors, partners, recently, or not necessarily recently, but bereaved partners or bereaved co-parents, as well as for parents of color. We have a kids group that meets monthly. We have 2 groups. One's for like little kids, and it's meant to be more of a like circle time, and parents attend that with kids. And then one for older kids that's a little bit more about making connections between kids, all kids, obviously, who have a parent with cancer. And we have a whole host of other programs, but one of the programs I'm most proud of is that we have a financial assistance grant. And so since the program has started, we've been able to give out over $500,000 to families. And the grant can be used however the family needs it most. So it could be for copays, but it could also be for childcare or for, new clothes for your kids, whatever it might be, whatever the family needs. We know that families have just such diverse and unique needs before there's a cancer diagnosis. And so the purpose of the grant is really to help just fill the gap, even if it's in a small way.
Wow, that's amazing. How old are your kids today?
Now my kids are 6 and 9, which is kind of hard to believe. Yeah. So my younger daughter, Amira, she was 6 months kind of when the whole kind of, journey started. And Mona was just over 3. And now they're in 1st and 4th grade.
Wow. And does it ever come up kind of what your family has been through? Or, I imagine given the work that you're doing day to day, it probably does a little more than maybe it might for other kids, but I'm curious if they thoughts.
It's interesting. I try to talk to my kids about it still a lot. And yes, it totally comes up because they know what my job is, and they know, so many of like my close friends, from my cancer, from having cancer. Now, so many of my close friends are also folks who are either living with cancer or who also had cancer. So it definitely comes up like that. I would say that my older daughter definitely, I don't know if she has like really distinct memories because she was still very young, but she will bring it up periodically, or like she'll kind of has I'm not sure wherewithal, but she has like, there is like a certain amount of empathy that I can tell. Like if she has a friend, there was somebody in one of her classes who's one of their parents was very, very sick, not with cancer, but, she came home and like reported that back to me. Whereas like every once in a while, my younger daughter, and we talk about cancer a lot, and she knows, like, I don't know, but every once in a while she'll be like, wait, you had cancer?
Right.
It's all the time, but it's somehow like, it's like, she doesn't remember it. I think also because we talk about it, it's so much just part of the, like, it's in the water in our house. It's like, I have kids' books everywhere where like parents are, the mom is bald and, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's just, we try to make it just so much a part of the conversation that it's not special. It's not unique. It's just something that families go through. It's, So, but I will say that, like, I would say maybe a year and a half after after I'd finished treatment. So like about 2.5 years after my original diagnosis, and my older daughter was 5-ish. We had a friend who had who I was getting a mastectomy, and I had talked to her about it because she knows that friend. And, but I didn't like talk to her about it a lot, whatever. We were just talking about it. And she was playing with Legos and came in to wherever I was sitting and just showed me this like whole diagram made out of Legos of the Lego friends visiting somebody in the hospital. And I was just like, that, it's in there. Like she was playing it out, like, she was definitely playing it out in that moment.
So interesting. Yeah. my oldest daughter, who was 5 when I was
Right.
diagnosed, is now going through the college application process. And so,
Um,
writing about some of these things. And similar to your family, I've kind of been in the cancer space, since my own personal experience. And I think the empathy piece that you called out is something that you don't necessarily realize, explicitly, but it was very fascinating to kind of see how she wrote about that experience and really remembering the kindness of our community. And, one of her prime memories is all these desserts that people brought to the house at the time. And so really kind of, it was interesting how in her memory it's captured actually as a very positive time, despite the fact that clearly it came with a lot of challenges as well. But kids are so resilient, but finding the way to communicate with them and to not leave them in that fearful place of whispering in the other room, and not
yeah.
kind of including them to whatever level you can, depending on their age. I think that's why I love what you guys are doing, because you're providing all of these tactics and ways to make what's a really hard experience at least a little bit easier, both for the parents and the kids, and kind of marrying those two together.
Yeah.
So I think it's really special. So thank you for your work.
Oh my God. No, thank you. I love that about your daughter kind of thinking of it as a positive time. I think that's so beautiful because sometimes as parents, when we're trying, well, one thing that we say in Bright Spot is that like as parents, like we know our job is to protect our kids. And so our like first instinct is to like not talk about the cancer. Like our instinct is like, no, like we want to protect them, like just if they don't know about it, then it's better, But like actually our job is to like shepherd them through the hard things and to teach them skills to like handle this and to handle things in the future. And, I think it really speaks to, like your parenting that she's able to take that moment as, and that like, there isn't shame attached to it. She like the fact that she sees it as like a positive time means that there was like really open communication during that time. And that's really beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's, again, we kind of all do the best we can. And, there's always things that we could have done better. But that's why I love having these conversations, because I think,
Yeah.
once you hear about resources that are available to help, it's just such a huge unlock for, hopefully fostering, those at least somewhat, as positive as a cancer experience can be.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah.
So Haley, I would love also to hear about what you thought about Dr. Barnett's podcast, because it was kind of an interesting, for me at least, listen, because, here she is a physician, she's going through med school and then becomes a patient. And so she wears kind of these two hats. And, just curious, clearly, like we all have different, Dr. Barnett had lung cancer, you had colon cancer, I had breast cancer, but were there any kind of themes that emerged for you as you listened that resonated with you?
Well, yes. I mean, I loved the episode partly because, whenever I hear a doctor especially talk about, cancer, but any type of diagnosis really, and they talk about their struggles in the medical system, I think it really like lifts up something that is, or like puts into relief, I think something that like all patients sort of face. And for her, it was how much she had to like advocate for herself, or like, she found pieces of her diagnosis or pieces of different health conditions through her own self-diagnosis, which, it's like, you're not supposed to do as a doctor, but she was like, people aren't listening to me. So it's like, you have to kind of take that into your own hands. And also how she talked about like how it can be so hard. I mean, it's on a good day, it can be hard to understand what a doctor is saying. And then if you are now talking to a doctor as a patient or as even a caregiver, and you have so much of the just like the emotional kind of load, it can be even harder to understand what a doctor is saying. I mean, I know that like I personally really related to that. I was lucky to be able to have my dad and my brother are both doctors. And so when I was in my appointments, I could like put them on speakerphone, and I was so happy to have somebody that were translating what my like very nice and clear spoken doctor was saying, because I wasn't getting any of it, like, and so I really appreciated just that like important, just that piece, and also just the piece of like how important it is to just advocate for yourself as a patient. I think once you have been a cancer patient, you know that that's kind of true, but just how much it really matters. If you feel an ache or pain, like you need to advocate to like get, sometimes you have to really push to get that kind of fully checked out or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Any other tidbits that, were surprising or, anything that caught your attention?
I think that the other piece that I really appreciated about this was kind of like a small thing at the beginning, but like when she was talking about how, as someone diagnosed with lung cancer, like a non-smoking lung cancer, like she didn't, she doesn't have she was like, where is this coming from? Like, where is this coming from? And then sort of like finding out like, oh, this person had lung cancer, this person had lung cancer. And I think that that's like a kind of like actually a sort of common experience that I hear about is like, how we sometimes, I mean, she didn't necessarily say this part, but this was like what I was kind of like inferring is how we sometimes don't talk about our health histories in our families, definitely not enough. And then here she is like finding out like, okay, like actually maybe I'm not the only one. And just like how interesting that is, especially as we're learning more and more about hereditary cancers and just like how much like family histories matter.
Absolutely. And I think that ties right back to the, children in our life and how
Totally.
Again, foster those conversations. And, I think it's a balance of you don't want to scare them, but you also want to be open. And again, that's what I think. Oh, go ahead.
No. Well, I would say, I think partly it's just like about being able to keep like open lines of communication, whether or not it's about like the cancer that you had or just like questions that you might have in the future. I mean, that's something that like we said to my older daughter at the time, was like, you can always come back to us. I mean, she was 3, so we said it differently. But the idea was that you can always come back to us with questions. We might not know the answer, but we'll always come back, try to find the answer for you. And like, I think especially with kids that like, I don't know, like who really like, but why,
Yes.
like, right. I think it's really important that you're like able to say like, I don't know why you have to come back, but like really come back in like an honest way. Cause that's, I think what ultimately is going to like help to foster that like trust, and then allows you to kind of have like age appropriate conversations as they get older that are maybe about hereditary cancer or, whatever kind of it might be.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Haley, this has been amazing. I think maybe in closing, and this, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, and maybe there's not like one, thing, but if, someone, and I know this happens to you all the time, when someone comes to you, said, I've just been diagnosed, where do I have these little kids, where do I start? What is the advice that you typically give in those moments?
Well, first I would say, take a deep breath. And all you can do is put one foot in front of the other. It's a lot. I think that like my like kind of like high level advice is that your kids, I mean, especially these like little kids are like, just like give yourself grace. They're not going to remember this particular moment. You're really creating like a home that like is like full of love. And like, if you are asking that question, then like your home already is that, and like give yourself grace. And then once you've kind of given yourself that grace and you're in a place to like tell your kids what's going on, then start there and kind of really start by talking to them about what's going on in age appropriate language, being honest, allowing questions. Books are a great place to start. You might already be reading books with your kids before bed. And so it can kind of feel like actually a disarming, friendly way to have a conversation that can be pretty intimidating. I think for the parent. So that can be a really great place to start. But I would say the first thing is give yourself grace. Know that, you're doing the best you can. And sometimes you're going to feel like you're killing it. And sometimes you're going to feel like you wish you could have done that differently. And the good news is you can come back to the conversation, And then once you've kind of like sort of taken that all in, then find out figure out how you want to talk to your kids about it, but then have that conversation. It's going to be hard, and there's probably going to be some tears, your own, and all of that's okay. And the important thing is that, you've sort of had that conversation and are able to like move through it.
Love that. Haley, thank you so much. This was so fun to chat with you. I'm so grateful for all the work you're doing, and we will link to Bright Spot Network in the notes of the podcast. And I look forward to our next conversation. I have like already so many questions that we're going to have to do this again.